With sub-zero temperatures forecast for tonight, it's a perfect opportunity to use my newly installed heat meter to work out my home's heat loss. I'm Tom, and in this video you can follow along as I try to use the readings from my heat meter to work out my home's heat loss. In order to help you understand how I plan to use the heat meter to measure my heat loss, I've prepared a simple example to walk through the mechanics. So here we have a house which is 10 degrees inside. Outside this rather chilly house, it's even colder and it's only 1 degree outside. Now, because it's warmer inside than it is outside, heat will flow from inside the house to outside. We measure the rate of that heat transfer in watts. And the bigger the temperature difference between inside and outside, the greater the flow of heat. So in this example here, we have a temperature difference of 9 degrees between the inside and the outside. So unless some heat is introduced into the system, eventually the inside of the house will reach the same temperature as the outside of the house, and we'll both have 1 degree, and heat flow at that point will stop as we've reached an equilibrium. If we now go back to our example house, it's 10 degrees inside, it's 1 degree outside, and we've got a certain amount of heat flowing out of the house. So if this was our house, what we would do now is we turn on the heating. So for me, that means turning on my boiler, and that will start introducing a rather large amount of heat into the house. So in a typical UK house, it will do that by heating some water and circulating that hot water around all the radiators, and the radiators will dissipate that heat into the house. So as we start introducing heat into the house, the temperature inside will start to rise. And after a little while, we've now got slightly warmer, it's 15 degrees inside. But what you'll also notice is that the rate at which we're losing heat has also increased. So earlier I said the greater the temperature difference, the greater the rate at which the heat will flow. So we now have a temperature difference of 14, so we've got a correspondingly larger heat loss from the house. Eventually, as we carry on, the rate at which we're putting the heat into the house will match the rate at which we're losing heat. So if we are introducing a fixed amount of heat on one side, that will eventually raise the internal temperature to a certain amount, in this example 22, and at that point we'll be losing heat as quickly as we're introducing it. So we will have reached an equilibrium between heat in and heat out. Now, using the heat meter, we're able to measure the heat going into the house. So we can then take the temperatures inside and outside and combine that with that reading to give us a heat loss figure. So if we take this example, let's say that the heat meter is reading 7 kilowatts, 7,000 watts. Our internal temperature is 22 and our external temperature is 1. So if we assume that those figures are pretty stable over a period of time, we can do a quick division and we'll arrive at a figure of 333 watts. So what that figure represents is for every degree of temperature difference between inside and outside, we will lose heat at a rate of 333 watts. This is also known as the heat transfer coefficient, or HTC. So once we've got that heat loss figure, we can work out the demand for heat in varying different scenarios. So on a mild winter's day, for example, or a mild autumn day, for example, it might be 10 degrees outside. So if I bring up a calculator, so if it's 10 degrees outside and we want it to be 22 inside, we've got a 12 degree temperature difference, and we multiply that by 333 in our example, and that will tell us that we need about 4 kilowatts of heat in order to raise the temperature of the house to 22 and maintain it. If it's a freeze the balls off a brass monkey winter's night, it might be -5 outside, in which case we'd have a 27 degree temperature difference. And again, we multiply that by our heat loss, and that will tell us that we need nearly 9 kilowatts of heat. So how am I going to do this in practical terms? Well, if we hop into Home Assistant, I'll show you the 3 points of data that I'm going to use. So the first one is the outdoor temperature. So that will serve as our outside in the example. Then I have a recording here of the average internal temperature. So across the house, I have quite a few of these little Akara, their temperature humidity sensors. So I've got all of those logging, and they average, they give me an average value across the entire house. So that will serve as my inside temperature. And then if we scroll down, we've got some data coming in from the heat meter. So this shows the flow and return and also current power reading. Now when I had my heat meter installed, I ran through how I got this data into Home Assistant. So if you'd like to know more about the heat meter I'm using and how I got it integrated, please do check out that video. So there are the 3 points of data that we need based on the example. But there are a couple of other considerations that we need to make before we perform the test. The first consideration is how much power the boiler is going to put in, or how much heat we're going to put into the house. Now, I run my boiler at a flow temperature of 40, so that keeps the boiler's output basically at its minimum almost all of the time. It's a 35 kilowatt boiler, so it's massively oversized. So it can kind of go down to about 5,800 watts at its absolute minimum. That was one of the considerations for waiting until the temperature outside was quite low, sort of 0, so that we've got a good chance of maintaining a nice temperature difference. I also need to keep the boiler running without turning off. So to accomplish that, I'm simply going to set the thermostats up to probably 22, like we did in the example. I don't want to set them any higher than that, because if the house does warm up overnight, I don't want it to get too warm and start disturbing our sleep. So I think 22 is probably going to be okay as an average. The upstairs in my house is a little bit colder. It's usually a degree or 2 colder than the downstairs. That's mainly due to unbalanced radiators, I think. But with that, I'm going to try using 22 as the upper point. So if we couple that, we will simply have our indoor and outdoor temperatures. We've got our heat meter reading an input, and I'm hoping that the input from the boiler will drop down to its minimum, because it will try to keep the flow temperature to sort of sitting around 40, so it won't be putting in too much heat, and the heat loss should be great enough to maintain a temperature under 22. That's the theory anyway. So I will kick this test off probably around 4 or 5 o'clock once the external temperature gets down, or once it's around 5, and we'll run that then overnight. I will check it every couple of hours and then test it again first thing in the morning, and with any luck it will run all night, and we'll have some good data to analyze tomorrow.
Much later.
So to get us started, it's already 5 degrees outside, and if we take a look at the temperature, we can see that it's been pretty steadily falling. So I'm going to start the test essentially now. So I've raised both the underfloor heating and kitchen temperatures to 21, which I hope is enough. Don't want to get too warm. Actually, I'm just going to set them to 22. And that gives us, if we kind of average those, that's about 19.4. It's 5 degrees outside, so we'll just call it 14. So there's a 14 degree difference The boiler is still, it's not quite running at its minimum. Its minimum power is at 15%. But if we have a quick look at the heat meter reading down there, so it's putting out 8.3 kilowatts now. So we'll need to let that settle down because I think that's still a little bit high. But both the underfloor and radiators are on. So we'll let that settle down and then we will take another look at that in a couple of hours.
2 hours later.
The heating has been on now for about 2.5 hours, and I'll jump in Home Assistant. So we can see the outside temperature has continued to fall. So we're now down at a brisk 3.5 degrees. The house has climbed up to 20.5, you can see here. The boiler is operating at its minimum. It can't go any lower than 15% power. And the heat meter is reporting 6.8 kilowatts. So that you can see has been steadily falling. So I don't think we've reached equilibrium just yet. And in terms of the temperature, let me just zoom in on this a bit. If we go from like 4 o'clock. That's interesting. It's not giving me any. Okay, we'll do show more. Okay, that's a bit better. And we'll look at that for today. And I'll put the heating on. It's just at 4. So the average temperature is still climbing. It's kind of we'll say every 40 minutes it ticks up 0.1 of a degree. So it's not ticking up very much, but we're probably quite close now to its maximum. So the boiler is this is pretty just kind of leveled out. Temperature is still falling, and 68. So if I just do some quick, and we're just going to bring a calculator up, and I'll bring that into view. So what we're saying is if we've an outside temperature of 3.5, and we'll split the difference there, we'll call that 20.25. I don't think it really matters. So we'll say 20.25, and we'll take away the 3.5. So that gives us a temperature difference of 16.75. Let's just call it 16.5 for argument's sake. And the heat meter now, it says we're putting in 6.7. So what we do, I've closed the calculator for some reason. So we'll put in our 6,700 watts, and we will divide that by, what did I just say, 16.5. So that's giving us a rough heat loss calculation at the moment of 406 watts per degree, which if we were to assume it was -3 outside, we'll do our 406. Oh, I should say, if it's -3 outside and it's 20 inside, that gives us a total temperature difference of 23. So we'll do our 23 degrees, we'll multiply that by 406. And that gives us a design kind of heat loss of 9.3, which is, yeah, that is actually not too bad. I would like it to be a bit lower, but that's not too bad. So I'll let this carry on for another 2 hours, and then we'll take stock again.
Much, much, much later.
Okay, it's 11 o'clock now, so just a quick update before I turn in. So we've been running the heating now for about 6 hours, and everything is kind of settled down. The outside temperature has dropped. Now it's just dipped below 3. The house is pretty steady, sort of 20.2, 20.4 in the kitchen. If we take a look at the graph, and we kind of look at that for today, from sort of say sort of 5 o'clock. Run that. You can see, yeah, it's still kind of gently crept up, but it's pretty level at about 20. The outside temperature has continued to kind of fall. If we take a quick look at that, it's a bit of a blip here where I went outside because I hadn't had an update for such a long time, and I just pushed the little button on the sensor itself. Not convinced the Acaras are great sensors outside, but it seems to be okay. So I'll leave that for now. I'm not going to go out and change it now. And in terms of the heat meter, that's been pretty steadily falling, and it's kind of leveling out now. It's sort of, I think the last reading is 6.2 kilowatts. So we're talking about, what are we talking about now? If I just bring up the calculator again. So we've got, what is that, 17.5 now, I think. I'm normally quite good at math, but it is quite late. Take away 2.7, so we're at 17.5. And if we take our 60 and we divide it by 17.5, that's given us 355 watts per degree right now. We multiply that by our 23. So that's better. That figure is getting smaller as the system kind of continues to run. So I guess an element of that is the fabric of the house warming up. If we take a look, yeah, again, we've got a kind of an average upstairs temperature of nearly 20. I'm not sure how comfortable that's going to be tonight, but we'll see how we get on. If it gets too warm and trouble sleeping, I'm just going to have to turn it off. But the temperature should continue to fall. It's due to get down to 1 degree. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll just wait and see. So I'll check this again in the morning, but the heat loss is approaching 8 kilowatts, which is, yeah, which is actually quite good. So yeah, let's leave that. We'll pick it up in the morning.
Much, much, much later.
Okay, so it's the following morning, and the heating, as best as I can tell, has been on all night. We had a bit of a wobble this morning, around 5:30, I think, when the hot water tank needed some help from the boiler to heat the water, my mixergy tank. Now that usually charges using electricity, just using the element. But as it was particularly cold, I guess it needed some help from the boiler, so I could actually hear the boiler getting louder as I was lying in bed, and when I checked my phone, I could see that there was a call for heat. So aside from that, it all seemed to go okay. Weren't uncomfortable or anything last night. So let's just have a look now at the performance, I guess. So we'll jump into Home Assistant, and you can see the heating is still on, both the underfloor and the radiators. It's a little above 0 outside. I've confirmed that. I checked my Tesla app, and the car is also reporting that it's 0. So the sensor did do its job, I think. I still have a suspicion that its proximity to the boiler's flue is giving me a slightly higher reading than it actually is, but it's not going to be out by that much, I don't think. And if we then have a look at the heat meter, yeah, the flow temperature of 40 it's been keeping the house nice and toasty, and the heat meter is, yeah, oh, you can see the spike. You you can see the spike there from the hot water, but yeah, that has been pretty steady all night. So that's from like 9, it's been kind of hovering around, it's been at 62, 61. So that's 6.2 kilowatts, which is great. So if we kind of look at that now, we've basically got we'll call that 20 and a half. I think we split the difference. So we could just call it a 20-degree temperature difference. So I will call up my trusty calculator. So basically we've got our 6200 watts, and we divide that by 20, that's going to come out 300 and odd. So that's 310 watts per degree. And if we look at, say, a design temperature, if it was -3 outside, we're actually looking now at 7 kilowatts, which is a little bit surprising. A welcomed number, but surprising. There's a couple of kind of caveats. We can still see that there's a little bit of a temperature difference, but the upstairs is warmer than when I checked it last night, and I suspect that's probably heat from people as well, kind of accumulating. And I have noticed the back bedroom sensor has dropped out, and I have a feeling that's the battery in that has finally died. And the bathroom temperature actually did get down quite cold. You can see that last night. Now it's spiked up here because I've had a shower, but the underfloor heating has probably come on as well. But that room is really quite cold, especially for the bathroom. So I'm already aware that the insulation in that room isn't as good as it could be. That's partly due to the cavity on one side wasn't wide enough to take the cavity wall insulation, which I didn't realise until we'd renovated the entire bathroom. So that was a bit annoying because I could have had insulation put on the inside of the bathroom wall. And I do need to insulate the floor as the bathroom is over the garage. So that's definitely a massive source of heat loss. Otherwise, if we check, let's say, the master bedroom, yeah, that was okay. So that sort of stayed at around 19, climbed up to 20 overnight. So that's okay. Interesting as well, because the master bedroom has probably the worst performing radiator in the whole house, as it's the furthest away and it's quite big, and it just never really gets that warm. So that's interesting that it's been managing to keep the temperature. Yeah, and there's obviously 2 adults asleep in that room at night, but even at sort of 7, 8 o'clock, the temperature on that kind of stayed steady all night, which is fantastic. Yeah, you can see the attic and the loft dropped down to 3.5, and downstairs you can kind of see the downstairs rooms are just that little bit warmer. My office has been warm as well because I've been in that since 5 o'clock this morning, so I'll have contributed a bit of heat to that, and the PC has been on, so that will be putting heat into the room too. The extension, that's done very well. I'm really pleased now that that's managed to essentially hold that temperature. I was always a little bit nervous that the underfloor heating wouldn't have been enough, but it's got a radiator in there too, which is a hangover from before we did the extension. So between those two, it's kept that room nice and toasty, which is great. So I'll probably repeat this experiment 1 or 2 more times this week, but I think that's kind of enough. Yeah, I think that's enough for this video. Sorry, I'm just kind of surprised at how low the overall heat loss figure got, given that it's essentially freezing outside. So I'm kind of pondering why it's lower than I expected, but that's good. And there's a bit more work to do in terms of changing the front door, And as I said, I need to insulate the bathroom a little bit more, but pretty pleased with that. I think that's kind of enough. Yeah, I guess that's enough sort of for this video. So I'll share all the findings in the description on the video. Hopefully you found that interesting. If you have, please do like and subscribe. I will, as a kind of a next step, be working out using that kind of degree days process to work out the expected heat loss just using my gas usage. That figure will be a bit weird because the house now has been changed, so we've had an extension put on, so that will have removed a load of single glazed aluminium windows, but we'll also have added a significant footprint and area to the house. So I'll be curious as to how those compare, and I'll do a video on kind of working that process out. I still want to do a paper-based heat loss calculation, so I will get round to that at some point. I won't do it kind of room by room. I'll probably just do it for the overall fabric, the exterior of the house, as I'm just measuring the internals, and I'm not too fussed about things like radiator sizing at this stage. Anything else? I think that's kind of about it. Yeah. As I said, I'll put everything into the description. If you've any questions, please use the comment section, and I'll try and answer anything that you throw at me. And otherwise, that's it. I'm Tom, and thanks for watching.